Oh, but did you know something cool? Guy actually means spirit.
What?
Yeah, it's like the root word in Latin or something like that.
Oh.
That's probably not what it is.
I wonder what girl means.
No. It meant spirit, and then over time it meant
boys.
It meant boy.
Etymology is so cool.
Mm-hmm. Is this just a phase? Is a question that people asked me as if they wanted me to think about it for the first time. Like, but did you think about this? Like, what if it's just a phase? Yeah, like transgender people think about that all the time, ruminate on that question before they even tell anybody. For years, people think about that question. Is this just a phase? Even when I was starting hormone replacement therapy, I thought about that. It's very scary, like going through it and being like, well, I've never done this before. I've never looked like a man. I've never had a deeper voice. What if I don't like it? Those are things that transgender people think about all the time. And looking back on it now, it kind of seems like allies are asking that for themselves. They want you to confirm for them, like, please prove to me this isn't a phase somehow so that I can support you. It should be enough for somebody to just say, I'm transgender, and then for you to be like, I trust that you've thought about these things before, I trust that you've done this and that, to develop your identity. And I don't know, it's just being transgender before you transition physically is a lot about proving to people and even to yourself who you are. Mm-hmm. And that can be very frustrating for people to not believe you.
I think it's important that you mention trust. If someone is coming out to you as transgender, they're already putting a huge amount of trust into you, so you should be able to do the same and trust that they've already thought this through.
But wait, then at the same time, I just said that being transgender is about proving to yourself who you are. So maybe it's not that terrible for somebody else to want that same kind of validation.
Yeah.
The second question is, this person in my life is transitioning, what should I call them? The answer is always to call that person by the pronouns and names that they ask you to. I admit I was really bad at that. I regret that because I feel like I could have been more supportive in that way and made Cassius feel more comfortable with himself, I guess, in a faster amount of time. I know that I was just having a difficult time dealing with it.
Oh yeah. I find it interesting that you said that because I don't remember you as somebody who just was refusing to catch up with the times.
I don't feel like I was a total jerk.
No.
Like some people were. Maybe I was just like putting a lot of pressure on myself, but I just felt really bad because I knew that you wanted me to call you by Cassius and him and her. Him and his. Most of the time, like, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I would just forget, or I just didn't feel comfortable. And actually, it wasn't until you did start taking hormones and your voice started getting deeper. I remember I'd be in my bedroom and you guys would be out in the living room and I'd be like, is there a guy over here? And I realized it was you. And then I was like, wow, like, I really need to start calling him. Yeah. You know what I mean? And Cassius. It was a really hard transition for me. It was at the back of my mind a lot of the time.
I feel that. And I think I understood that it was a lot to ask. That is a lot to ask from somebody. I don't think I ever pressured you. I hardly ever correct people when they do that because I know that it's such a hard thing to do. But there are other people who really retract and like get inside themselves a lot when they get misgendered by their family members. I retract more when I get misgendered by other people, by people who are not my family members. Yeah. I just realized that. Yeah. But anyway, my advice for that is I would say just make sure that you're aware of how you're making people feel in all walks of life, but especially in this one. Just be aware because we're like cats. Like we won't show you how we're feeling until it's really bad. Like, I think about being transgender all the time, and some of them are bad thoughts, and I don't tell people. And they'll only say something when they really notice, like, whoa, Cassius looks really down today. I wonder why. So.
Difficult time dealing with it because I felt like I was losing my sister. Cassius and I have always been very close, and when we were younger, it was to the point that we didn't even call each other by our names, we called each other sister. Cassius was always the person I spoke to about my relationships or my crushes, what clothes I should wear that day, all kinds of stuff. I was a little bit in denial about losing that, and that's again why I say you have to recognize that you're not losing anything, because at the end of the day, Cassius is still that person who I ask for advice about what I should wear that day, and he's still that person who I talk to about my relationships. Fundamentally, nothing has changed about him at his core or in his soul, whatever you want to call it. It's just the outward things that have changed, and it took some getting used to, but I think it's really important to respect what people ask of you and what they're comfortable with, because it already takes so much courage to say, hey, I don't think I'm a girl anymore, or I don't think I've ever been a girl. Once they've already taken that step, and then on top of that asked you to refer to them by a different name or different pronouns than you're used to, I think it's the least you can do to meet them there. You know what I mean? They've already taken that first gigantic step, and it's now for you to step up too.
What was I talking about earlier? I said something like, oh yeah, it's a lot to ask somebody. It's a lot to be asked of, to use a different pronoun for somebody you've known as the opposite pronoun. I really want allies to realize that and to know how special they are to be a part of somebody's life in this moment in time, and how much they're impacting somebody else's experience in life. It's a true test of character to see how you treat somebody in this kind of situation. It's a really, really big deal, and I just hope that you pat yourself on the back for even watching this video and for looking for advice, because even that step is more than a lot of people do.
True.
Also, if you're not sure and somebody hasn't told you that they're transitioning, or for example, something that used to happen a lot when Cassius was transitioning was that a waiter would come up to the table that we were eating at and say, hey ladies, what can we get for you? If you notice someone who is, I guess, on the in-between, you can't really tell, I think it's much better to refer to them in a gender neutral kind of way, by using they and their instead of he, she, that kind of a thing. I think that kind of helps. But I mean, I don't know. Cassius, you can help me out with this if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. I've even heard people talk about how it's not great to assume anybody's gender in any situation, even if they are dressing masculinely. So even if it is a group of men, being like, hey boys, or like something like that could potentially spin somebody into their heads. Because I know transgender women who present as men because they feel it would be too difficult. Even gearing your language toward any group of people away from gender would contribute to gearing our society away from gender, and that would make it more easy for transgender people to exist.
We have a friend who is training to be a teacher right now. She's working on addressing groups of her students as just, hey, you all, instead of hey guys or hey girls. Hey, you all. Much more inclusive of everyone. Right. It doesn't assume anything either.
Yeah, in my new student orientation group, we also are trained to say you all.
So maybe eventually, as a society, we'll all start doing that.